Hello, hello, welcome, welcome. My name is Preston Jacobs. We're talking about really old books. um, so tonight I wanted to go over briefly the um, the miracle of the Storm of Swords. Because people get on this issue of why did dance take so long? Why did feast take so long? Why is winds taking so long? Um, it's how can it be taking so long? And yet we have this other example of something that's equally perplexing. How did Storm happen so fast? And in case you guys didn't know, maybe I'll do some quick overlays here. Okay, so a Game of Thrones. George began in 1991. He wrote about a sixth of it, 13 chapters until 1992. Then he took a break, took 2 years off to do doorways and such. Comes back to it and late 93, and then it doesn't get published until a good um, uh, late 96. So you can argue that a Game of Thrones took about 4 years um, to write. I mean, you could probably decrease that down if you really want and say that he was doing other things and stuff like that. But um, Game of Thrones, the original, like it did take a bit. Um, so, Clash of Kings, it took roughly a little over 2 years to finish A Clash of Kings. I think you're talking like in August to shifting the publication to November or something. So we're talking like something like we'll say 2.25 years, pretty fast. Though a lot of A Clash of Kings was kind of finished during the Game of Thrones time, it's very difficult to parse out when each of these were made, uh, were written, and maybe that gets into the A Storm of Swords too. A Storm of Swords published in about August of 2000 about, but that means we're talking about 1.75 years for A Storm of Swords. Um, and then if we're talking Feast, then we're talking A Feast for Crows takes 5 years. And we're talking A Dance with Dragons takes 6 years. I've only put years in the plural on the singular in all of these. I think you'll forgive me. It's fine. So we'll say it's like a 6 year effort. 6 year effort, we'll say, because I forgot to pluralize years here. And then, of course, A Dance with Dragons, or The Winds of Winter, 14 years. Oh fuck! I forgot my I lost my Dance with Dragons here. So you can kind of clearly see. Now, the other thing, though, hidden in all of these, is that A Game of Thrones, A Clash of Kings, A Feast for Crows, they are very different sized books from A Dance with Dragons and A Storm of Swords. Okay? A Game of Thrones, A Clash of Kings, A Feast for Crows, they're like 300,000 word books, while A Storm of Swords and Dance with Dragons are 400,000, 415,000. So they are literally 25%, 33% bigger. And so which explains like why Dance with Dragons could take a little longer because it's a longer book. You know, if you actually look at the time period, if you're actually talking about page for page, A Dance with Dragons is actually a faster writing period than A Feast for Crows. If you start calculating it by the page, but A Storm of Swords, shortest period of time and the longest book. Like it's as long as A Dance with Dragons. I think it might be slightly longer. I have to look up the exact word count. I think it's 415,797, while A Dance with Dragons is 415,268. So by about 500 words, A Storm of Swords, somehow the longest book written in the shortest amount of time. So how did this happen, right? What was George doing during this period of time that made it so, and when you look at the writing process, he never had any like sticking points. Like when I go over the writing process for Game of Thrones and A Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons, there's definitely points where he was stuck, and it's very clear he was stuck, and he had to do other things to like shift things around. A Clash of Kings, he doesn't seem to have been stuck, but he just got it done. But a Storm of Swords never gets stuck. Now, some people say, okay, well, maybe he's just like stream of consciousness writing, and he's just whipping it out, and he's not going back and editing. But no. If you actually when you go to when G. Steph went to the Cushing Library, he actually found that A Storm of Swords had the most wordsmithing of all of the other books. That he actually went back and didn't change the plot around very much, but he did wordsmith A Storm of Swords a lot, page for page, a lot more than he wordsmithed Game of Thrones and A Clash of Kings. So it may be that he wrote A Storm of Swords in a different fashion. Like it could be that again at Game of Thrones and A Clash of Kings, he wrote slowly, he went along, he perfected it, and he didn't have to go back. And maybe that's a slower process. While A Storm of Swords, maybe he wrote the whole thing and then went back and started wordsmithing it later, after. But I think there's a few other things to think about A Storm of Swords. Because people forget, Storm of Swords is an action-packed book. It's many people's favorite in the series. I would say that when I talk to fans, most fans think A Storm of Swords is their favorite book. However, I will say, A Storm of Swords, great action-packed book. The pace, first time reading it, it's probably the most enjoyable. But there's some things that are sloppy in it. There are some things that are very sloppy in A Storm of Swords. And when we go back and we think about how sloppy A Storm of Swords is, would George, in the A Feast for Crows, A Dance with Dragons time frame, tolerate the sloppiness that was in A Storm of Swords? And I know people are going to get angry because they're like, how dare you, Preston, say that certain things are sloppy? But let's bring up the chapter list for A Storm of Swords, because so here we are. I'm sorry if this is a little small, and now let's get rid of my book numbers here because these are in the way. So can I zoom in on this? Zoom in on this bullshit? Yeah, come on. Okay. All right. Now, here's A Storm of Swords. Now, people love A Storm of Swords. They start thinking, oh my God, so many great moments in A Storm of Swords. Okay, you've got Jaime coming back for Brienne at Harrenhal. You've got the Sapphires incident. You've got, by the way, Sapphires is one of the the Sapphire's Ruse is one of the few changes that George actually did to A Storm of Swords plot-wise. Originally, Brienne was actually raped, and beaten, and that was the story. And George changed it to have Jaime save her, and but that's one of those changes that happened. But yeah, the early drafts at the Cushing Library actually describe a pretty rough situation there. But for the most part, A Storm of Swords doesn't have major plot changes. And I think that's a huge thing. And when you think about like a Game of Thrones, adding Sansa as a point of view is a major plot change. Deciding that the dragons are going to hatch, deciding that the eggs are going to be found earlier, and things like this. There are major structure changes to a Game of Thrones. A Feast for Crows and Dance with Dragons, they're countless. Victarion not dying, the Myronese knots, and adding, adding so many points of view late in the game, adding Quentyn, adding Melisandre, adding Jon Con, adding Barristan, having the 3 different sticking points with the Jon, Tyrion, and Dany chapters. There's a lot that shifts around. Clash of Kings, massive changes with regards to glass candles. Like the entire glass candle plot is removed from A Clash of Kings. Massive restructuring of those stories. Not so much with The Storm of Swords. So that's one thing on why it makes it through so fast. There's no major, other than Brienne not getting raped, there's actually nothing really that changes in the plot. There's little things. There's little things like, Tywin foreshadowing the Red Wedding a little more. There's the original draft, Catelyn's destruction of herself when she dies is longer and more intense. But for the most part, there's not much story-wise that changes in George's head when he writes Storm. Now, at the same time, maybe there should have, because there's sloppiness. So let's start talking about this story a little bit. Okay. Storm of Swords prologue is obviously Chet, Fist of the First Man. That's pretty exciting, action-packed. But then we get to the Jaime story. And I want to talk about Jaime here, okay? Now, everybody remembers like the incredible sapphires and him coming back to the bear pit, Harrenhal. Really memorable stuff, right? But remember where George gets really stuck. George gets stuck when major characters run into each other. This is a problem for him. Okay, so A Dance with Dragons, one of the major problems was the Myronese knot, where he has Victarion and Quentyn and Tyrion all heading to Slaver's Bay. And him dealing with the timing of when they're going to arrive. And then another sticking point is Tyrion and when he runs into Jorah and Jon Con and how he's going to handle that. And then that was also the major sticking point 2. And major sticking point 1 is Jon. And it's when Mance and Stannis leave and that time period and figuring that out, and versus when Tormund is coming. So when characters leave and run into each other and deal with those stories is difficult for George. Getting the timing right, making the narrative make sense. Okay, now I want you to think about Jaime here. Okay. Now, yes, Jaime has a near miss with Arya, but it's. I'll talk about Arya in a second, but about the Arya Storm of Swords story, which I think a lot of people think is probably one of the weaker stories of A Storm of Swords. While Jaime is considered quite strong. But remember, Jaime, after the bear pit and everything, he arrives in King's Landing. And when you actually ask fans, like, hey, what was Jaime doing during Tyrion's trial? You'll probably get most fans pausing and being like, was Jaime in King's Landing? Wait, where was Jaime? Wait, what? And you realize like, oh, right. Jaime showed up at King's Landing, weirdly had no conversations with his dad, did not visit Tyrion, and then all of a sudden breaks Tyrion out of jail, thinking about and decides to spill to him the Taisha secret out of fucking nowhere, even though like nothing, no aspect of his character even thought about it up to that point. Or if he did think about it, it was stuff like Tyrion loves me for a lie, stuff that doesn't even fucking make sense, right? So when you actually think about like the Jaime story, it's actually quite sloppy once he runs into King's Landing. When he runs into the other major characters, the story kind of falls apart. Like, what the fuck is Jaime doing? Like, why doesn't he talk to his dad? Why doesn't he go visit Tyrion? What is he doing? And you know, once you think about it, you're like, oh, actually that's kind of sloppy. Now, compare that. That is like the Jaime Knott of A Storm of Swords. Essentially what George did is he just didn't fucking do anything. He just muscled through. Unlike the Myronese Knot of A Dance with Dragons, where George obsesses over it and rewrites many drafts, deciding like when he's going to arrive. Do we hear that with Jaime? Do we hear like, well, what happens if Jaime arrives after the trial? What happens if he arrives during the trial? What happens if he arrives a month before the trial? Like, and then testing out which one like makes sense. Well, it turns out, you know, the one in story doesn't really make sense. It's probably one of the sloppier things, but like, you know, he muscled through it, and we forgive it because the Storm of Swords is just action. But that is one of the sloppier points when the characters run into each other. I'm trying to think of some other like, so. I mean, we could say that like Jon and Bran running into each other. There's another one. I mean, it's fun and all, but doesn't really make sense. Or Bran running into Sam, like that's fun and all. But like if you really start thinking about the timing, like how long Bran is walking up the road, like what is he doing? Would that work out? Why are there these towers that they're hiding in? Oh, right. They're towers in the gift that Jon was actually going to receive as part of Ned's dream of spring, but that removes Jon's ability to have any resentment and want to join the Night's Watch in the first place. Like you kind of like go, oh, wait, huh? Like, well, I need to have Jon and Bran run into each other, but they can't run into each other, so I have to have Bran inside a tower. But why is there a tower? I don't. Why is there a tower in the middle of nowhere in the north? I'm just going to invent a reason. Like, now with regards to Arya, now people kind of joke that the Arya story in A Clash of Kings and A Storm of Swords is her just wandering for 2 books. Some people love it, but some people think the Arya story in A Clash of Kings and A Storm of Swords is weak. But Arya, if we start talking about like where she is and geography and how long things take to get everywhere, it's chaos. There's no explanation on like where the fuck Arya is and how long it takes to travel and what the fuck the Brotherhood Without Banners is doing. And so when Arya has a near miss with Jaime and then happens to be all the way up at the Twins and then happens to be at the inn at the Crossroads, and then ends up at Salt Pans, it doesn't fucking matter. He's just warping her to wherever he wants her to be. So all of them work out. Like she gets to be at the Red Wedding, and she gets to almost run into Jaime, and she gets to run into Salt Pans and be at the end of the Crossroads and things like this. So, I mean, granted, you know, I admit these are all like very exciting things, but you know, when you start like analyze, if you put on A Feast for Crows, A Dance with Dragons, like analysis that we fucking hyper fixate on whether things going to make sense, it doesn't really make sense, you know, or like the Daenerys story happening within a few weeks while the rest of A Storm of Swords happens over like many months. Well, you know, or the sloppiness of you know of this it's an organization that sells slave soldiers, and the fact that they just like are dumb enough to give control over to someone before, and then have no mechanism of safety. Um, if the person orders them to turn on them, like couldn't like ignore the dragons. Like couldn't Danny have done that with like anybody? Like couldn't anyone have come in and being like, okay, I own the soldiers now, right? Yeah, okay, kill all the masters. It's like that. It's like the scene in Terminator where he walks into the gun store and grabs a gun and loads it and then kills the guy owning it. Like that would never happen at a gun store. Like they don't just hand over ammo to people like with guns. Like it's just basic safety kind of thing. But also the thing with Storm, and you know how people, their big hatred of a lot of feast and dance is the fact that it's a lot of like wandering, Tyrion wandering, and Brienne wandering, and things like no one ever getting anywhere. People love the Red Wedding, they do. It's epic. But if you were to ask a fan, what does Catelyn do in Catelyn 1? What does she do in Catelyn 2? What does she do in Catelyn 3? What does she do in Catelyn 4? This isn't like in a Game of Thrones where you're like, oh, well, fuck. Like, she, Catelyn, like, like you kind of know, like, chapter by chapter, like, what she's up to. Like, oh, well, Catelyn 1, she's, like, in the Godswood with Ned. And then Catelyn 2, she's in the bedroom with Ned. And then Catelyn 3, she's, like, dealing with the cat's paw, and then she's making it to King's Landing, and then she's running into Tyrion at the end of the crossroads, and then she's making up to the Eyrie, and then she's going down, and it's exciting, all of the things that Cat does. Same with Clash, where she's like meeting Stannis and stuff. And Storm, what's Catelyn doing? She's listening to Hoster like talk about like Tansy tea, and feeling sad about wills and shit, like things like this. Catelyn does a bit of wandering if you think about it. Okay, Arya does a bit of wandering. Sam does a bit of wandering. Jaime does a bit of wandering. There's a lot of travelogue in it. And my last thing, people are going to think I'm being way too critical of Storm. But also think about, do the Storm stories lead to their climax? Logically, in a logical narrative. Like take a chapters that like the Dany story or the Jon story that people kind of really were frustrated with in A Dance with Dragons, but I would say that they logically lead to their conclusion. Okay, Jon, you build up the food crisis, letting wildlings through the wall, bringing the giant in, bringing the red god people in, giving away castles to Stannis. There's this build up and build up and build up, and then the mutiny, right? Dany, it's kind of the same, right? There's all these different problems. The Astapor and the refugees and Yunkai and opening the slave market and the wedding and the Sons of the Harpy, and it's building and it's building and it's building, and it leads to this her wanting to get out of there and a war with Barristan, right? Now you think about Catelyn. Catelyn's story a little bit, like, I admit, like, Robb comes back and he's married. Okay. But that's one thing. And then she's just wandering around. And then there's Davos. The Davos story is about Edric Storm. And it's about Edric Storm. And then it's, let's all go to the Wall. The Jon story is about battle, and then election. In many ways, like, events just happen. Tyrion getting sprung from prison out of nowhere, where the narrative doesn't actually lead to a destination. Um, well, in A Dance with Dragons, George was very concerned with like how this story is progressing and whether it's progressing in a logical like fashion. So all in all, oh Bran, yeah, Bran wandering. It's there's a lot of wandering in A Storm of Swords. Let's be honest. But it's just that the chapters that people love, you know, like the Jamie story is so strong, and then the John story is so exciting in A Storm of Swords, and Tyrion's story is so exciting in A Storm of Swords. Um, that and the Sam story is so exciting, and the Sansa story with Purple Wedding and all, this is so exciting. I mean, um, there's so many action pieces that we kind of forget that it doesn't fit together. Actually, it fits together quite sloppily, and it's something that later George, like late George, A Feast for Crows, A Dance with Dragons George, would probably not um, tolerate. So I'm going to say that the reason the storm happens and the storm's so fast is he just didn't fucking care about plot holes, and he didn't like he wasn't so like focused on it. He wasn't so focused on like where each narrative story was going. He was just fucking writing, and the thing is, it works. So in the end, like when we go over this with Carmine a bit when we talk about the conclusion of like should something stay faithful to the source material or should it deviate, and it's like it doesn't matter. Like if it's good and everyone forgives it. Um, and if it's bad, it's bad, and people make up reasons. But in the end, like Storm of Swords, it's a great book, but it's also a very sloppy book, and I think it's when George dealt with the same sort of knots that he ran into later on in Feast and Dance, he just plowed through. He plowed through and he didn't care. And they're there, like all the sloppiness is there. Um, and he just invents things like, how is Sam gonna get through the wall to meet Bran? Well, there's a fucking black gate. Why not? I'm just gonna fucking invent this shit to make it happen. Anyway, we will see. We'll see. Um, why does this say, bro? Hey, the song of Ice and Fire. I'm just saying, the Storm of Swords. It's if you actually think about the book and take it off its pedestal, it's it's got a lot. It's sloppy. It's sloppy. It's great. It's great, but it's also sloppy. Um, how the story fits together. Anyway, George just became a little too perfectionist later on. I guess he should have just muscled through. Been like, I don't care if this doesn't make sense. It's just happening. Um, you look like Alfred Wegener. No shade. All right, let's look up Alfred Wegener, German climatologist and geologist. I mean, so my background, strangely, doesn't. I mean, my background is mostly Dutch, and Scots Irish, but the oh Jesus, guys, how do I get this smaller? Picture's too big. Um, but when I lived in Germany, everyone thought I was German. So the fact that I'd like look like a German dude, that doesn't surprise me. But this guy, I mean, he's got deep set eyes. My nose isn't quite as bulbous as his. I have smaller ears than him. My ears are kind of small. But yeah, he's got deep set eyes. I think that's the big thing is people when they find people that look like me, um, it's the eyes that people kind of focus on. I want to show you another picture. This is somebody said kind of looks like me is the actor from That Thing You Do. And you might think that guy doesn't look like a Preston at all. But Let's see, where is he? His name is. It's funny because like everybody else kind of became famous except for. He's like the lead, and I can't find his fucking name. Tom Everett Scott, right? Yeah. Now, obviously when I had hair, it was a little more to look like him. But like the thing about Tom Everett Scott is like he also has these kind of like deep set eyes that I do. Um, I had a different nose, but a different chin. But like when I had hair, because those eyes are very similar, people were like, "Oh, kind of look." But who knows? That's the big thing. It's the big thing that's kind of like me is uh is the eyes. Um, George will split Danny and Daenerys into two separate point of views for wins. I looked through like trying to figure out if it was funny or not, like how you could separate them. Unfortunately, like Daenerys and Danny do the same fucking things. I mean, it is true that like outside of Viserys, no one else calls her Danny, but like the story calls her both Danny and Daenerys when she's doing action. Game for two players was meant as an N64 co-op game. Varys realized Westeros was now a battle royale. Shadowbinder faction will be a DLC. This is the big joke because fans have gone back to that Arya 3, A Game of Thrones chapter where Varys and Illyrio are talking, and Varys says this is no longer a game for two players. And the question is like, well, who's the other player? He then begins to like list all of the other characters that are causing him anxiety. So he mentions Loras Tyrell, and he mentions Lysa Arryn and Stannis, and he mentions Littlefinger, and he goes through the list. And so the question, it's like, well, who's the other person? And so an earlier me that believed George was more perfect than he is, was like, he must be talking about Doran Martell. He's the only one that's left. Like Doran Martell must be the actual adversary to Varys. Now I believe that he was just writing, and he didn't actually put any thought into like who the other adversary was. That he was just a saying that like, this isn't a game for two players, it's a game for 1 million players. Let me list all the players. And I don't think it was actually Doran Martell. I mean, if you want to retcon and make that the case, fine. But I think George's intention when he wrote that line was, I don't think he had anyone in mind. A Storm of Swords related question. Varys was on Aerys II's council the night Jaime killed Aerys. Does Varys probably know where all the wildfire is stored? One would think. Even beyond that, okay? If Varys is, assuming Varys was, I wouldn't say even just as active, a quarter as active as he is in the modern story. Like, let's say he still had, maybe he didn't have 25 little birds, but say he had 4. And say he wasn't hanging in the walls all the time, but he was doing it sometimes, right? He would definitely have somebody that spied on the pyromancers and knew that they were making all these freaking stashes of wildfire. And then after, when the wildfire was found, some of it was found by underneath the Great Sept and cleared out, like he would have heard about that too. And he would have been like, I wonder if there's more wildfire around. So yeah, I mean, logically speaking, Varys should know absolutely where that, at minimum, that yes, there's wildfire fucking everywhere all over the city. Like he should fucking know that. He should have had people following Tyrion when he talked to the Wisdoms. He should have had people following Cersei when she talked to the Wisdoms. In fact, he had to. He's the one that told Tyrion about him. He has to know that there's old wildfire, that there's new wildfire, that it's all over the fucking place. Like, Varys has to know. Which is also like this weird thing. Like, why, why was Varys so loyal if he's supposedly thinking about the realm? Like, why is he so loyal to Aerys? Or does he even fucking care? He's just like, yeah. Why is he letting the Mad King rule and do all this shit? What was his scheming routine back then? See, it's weird is that like Varys has a goal now of putting Aegon on the throne, but before Aegon was even born, what was Varys's like reason for getting up in the morning? Like, what was he doing with his time? We don't really know. Was he trying to install Blackfires back then or whatever? Like, how? Like, what actions was he doing? Was he trying to create paranoia between Rhaegar and the Mad King? Can you change the order? Yeah. I'll get to the playlists and fix those up. Okay, let's see. Killer party last week, bro. Varys killed Pycelle and Kevin, imitating Aegon and Rhaenys' murders, crushing the head, stabbing. Was he trying to frame the Martells or what? Thoughts? That's that's funny how many times I've read the book and I hadn't thought of that. But you are right that he that he does get his the one does have his head crushed and the other stabbed. I mean, it's true. I mean, obviously, like if you really wanted it to be the same, it would be dashed against the wall. You'd pick up Pycelle and dash him against the wall. Then it'll be a little more obvious. And then they find Kevin hiding under a bed and they pull him out and they stab him a million times. And, I don't know who would be the Elia Martell in that situation. Was he trying to frame the Martells or what? Well, that's the thing is, I mean, if I could look, I overlooked that. I think it's pretty, unless there was some message, like you shoved Kevin under a bed and you had Pycelle against the wall or something. I think you would need to have that kind of like statement to connect it, because hitting people over the head and stabbing people is just a little too common. I mean, you may be onto something. Maybe George was really thinking about that. Maybe he was really thinking about paralleling them with a head hit and a stabbing and a multiple stabbing. But it's still pretty subtle. I don't know how many people like picked up on that. So I think like even the characters in story would be like, huh, because I mean, also the thing is like in that scene, Varys is more focused on the irony of shooting Kevin with a crossbow because Tywin was shot with a crossbow. Then those two things are a little more unusual than head wound and stabbing. But that's all. Yeah, I think the characters in story would just miss it. They would miss the irony, just as I did if it was intentional. Hi, Preston, longtime fan, first time, etc. in the fanfic. Asha has an unfinished thought right before the charge. What was she going to do on the morrow? Let me bring this up. Got to get to do. Asha down in 387. Oh no. Oh no. Oh no. Come on. Come on. Come on, mouse. Come on, there it is. Back. Okay. Like my mouse isn't near lot. It still says. Oh, I guess it doesn't give me my charge amount. Okay. It's I think this, off the top of my head, this is when she catches little Walder, and he is. I gotta get to this. Or she catches Big Walder, and then she's like, here it is. Okay. So this is exactly what he's going to be talking about here. And I do think it's probably nothing that we that was thought about in too depth. So she says, her men vaulted from her saddle as she did, and did as she bid. From beneath the snow came a high-pitched squeal. Only after they dug a foot down could she make out what the knight was saying. I yield, and so will your men. There would be no more songs. There would be more songs today after all. The sooner she got the knight back to Stannis, the sooner this battle would be over, and the sooner the men could get to singing them. On the morrow she would, and then crack. I imagine it was, logically speaking, like if in her mind she has the commander in her head, and so everyone is going to surrender, and then at that point, they'd be dealing with the surrender and things like that, and then so on the morrow she'd probably go and see Stannis and like demand that she have some certain rights of this and that for her success in capturing this commander for him. The idea is like renegotiate her position with Stannis is really what she's probably thinking about in this situation, because like once she brings him back and they have the surrender, they're dealing with the logistics of the surrender, and then the question is like the next day what she would then do and demand from Stannis is the answer. It's something rather boring like that, but something needed to be interrupted. Like story wise, the crack has to interrupt something, So that's the whole idea, is that she's just having thoughts in her head. She's thinking about stuff, and like something gets interrupted. And so it's like, it's her scheming and planning. She's like, well, now that I've got this commander and Stannis is going to look at me differently, then what, how am I going to go forward on that? But that's the real answer to it. Didn't think about it in any too not to disappoint you, but like didn't think about it in too much detail, but it's something like that. That it's just that her whatever scheming and renegotiation with Stannis on her placement on her place would be the thing that she'd be talking about. But realistically, it's something needs to be interrupted. So that was the thing that was interrupted. Something needed to be interrupted. But thank you for the question. I do love questions on the fanfic. Who do you think killed Maegor? I bet it was Rhaena. Annoyed. Llama has a good theory. Do you think you get a solid answers for Fire and Blood's open-ended stuff? I don't think we're ever gonna get an open. In order to get something like that. George left Maegor the Cruel's death purposely ambiguous, and I don't think we'll ever get a live action Maegor the Cruel kind of situation. But obviously he wasn't killed by the fucking. I did have a theory, and I'm trying to remember it because it's just like, how many people think about Maegor the Cruel and Fire and Blood stuff? But I think I don't think he was killed by one of his wives. I don't think he was killed by one of his wives. I'm assuming that he was. I think he was probably killed by his Kingsguard, which makes a little more sense because the Kingsguard are supposed to be guarding him at all times, and so in order for someone to get in to kill him, or even for him to commit suicide, like the Kingsguard has to kind of allow it because they're around him all the time. And so if he has a Kingsguard there, it kind of mirrors Jaime in all the sort of sense. But I would argue that it would be his Kingsguard. I'm trying to remember. Do we know who his Kingsguard were during Maegor the Cruel? Let's go over this. Who's Maegor the Cruel's Kingsguard? Right, he's got a Darkland, a Bush, Moore, Tolette, Crane, Langward, Bracken, and Mallory. Okay. And let's see, they Maladin Moore was executed by Jaehaerys for some reason. Why is Maladin Moore? Lost his. Maladin Moore was executed for accused of being involved in the death of Queen Cerise, allegedly restraining her when Sir Owen accidentally killed her. Maladin denied these charges. It's one of these things where like any of these guys that went to the wall could have as well. Chose to take like Sir Crane, and Langward refused to take the black, was slain in trial by combat. But I'm gonna guess that it's a Kingsguard, and I forget one of the houses. Didn't he accuse? Didn't he? Doesn't he go back on a bunch of his houses near the end and starts like accusing them all of being traitors? Hayford suggests that he gets take the abdicate and take the black, and so Hayford gets executed. I'm sure it can be riddled out. I mean, like which one of these guys' houses, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be one of the King's Guard, right? Unless did they all desert? Oh my god, I forget to charge this mouse. Come on, mousey. BWB. How unprofessional, Preston. Don't have your mouse charged. Oh. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, All right, there we go. What's funny is I think I think I remember trying to figuring it out, and having it like and having a someone that I thought it was, and now just forgetting it because it's fucking Magor and Fire and Blood. So I'm sorry that it's like not on the top of my head right now on what happened, but I don't think it was a queen, and I don't think it was suicide or the throne killing him. But I think it was one of his King's Guard, or some night like that. Okay. Now we're into the storm talk. Yeah, the rapid fire payoff at the end of the books are rather spectacular. It's true. It's true with Storm. It's very, very exciting when you're going straight from the battles to the trials to to the election to the murders at the weddings to Lysa getting pushed out the moon door and stuff like that. All right, chapter is how we get to know Qyburn is how doing to Clegane. He's using Bruce Bolton's leeches. I mean, it may just be that leeches are creepy, but I don't know if you can reanimate somebody with leeches. There's this theory that um, that the only thing wrong with uh, the Mountain is that he had kidney failure, and so he's on dialysis, and so he has like dialysis in a colostomy bag, and that's why he doesn't go to the privy, and like he just needs transfusions all the time, which is why he like is constantly asking for more people from Cersei, is that he's just getting transfusions because he needs blood transfusions and dialysis. Um, Sam's been blessed by the warlocks of Karth, and Euron's cursed by them. Will that play any role in the Battle of Blood? I don't think so. I mean, I don't know if Sam's been blessed by the warlocks. They were, Sam gets bathed in blood to, um, in order to get to the cravenness out of him. Um, so I don't know if that's really a blessing. Um, and the cursing, I mean, you know, yeah, I suppose he grabbed somebody and he tortured them, and whatever powers they have, which isn't very much apparently. Um, so I mean, the whole thing about about the the warlocks is that they kind of don't have any powers, right? Like the warlocks, like they have their wine and they can see visions, and maybe they like in a collective sense they can form a uh, an undying consciousness, but the warlocks are remarkably weak, right? Like a baby dragon burns them all to death, and tears them apart. And they did nothing. They could do nothing about it, and then their whole place burns down because of one tiny like baby dragon. Um, and then they get captured immediately by Euron and enslaved. So the warlocks they were unable to get the cravenness out of Sam. So I think yeah, the warlocks are kind of pathetic. But I don't know if they were blessed by Sam was blessed by the warlocks of Karth. But yeah, will they have a role in the Battle of Blood? I don't think much. I mean, I think the warlock wine might play a role because it allows visions and shit, and that's fun to put on page. But I don't think Euron is doing anything with the warlocks. I mean, he's Aaron thinks he's collecting holy men, and there's something special about that, and you know, maybe in a sense that they're telepathic, and there's something that they can do telepathically because he has septons too, and maybe there's something about praying and their abilities to pray and it being telepathic, but I don't know if there's anything with blessing and cursing in there. Um, I'm trying to think if anything in story has been successfully blessed. Like we can kind of claim that okay, maybe you can argue that Harrenhal is like actually cursed, but has anything been successfully blessed in Ice and Fire? I don't know. I don't think so. Um, mm, let me check something real quick here. Uh, mm, 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 mm. Let's see here. Do you think Daenerys is entitled? I do. I once read a post saying that Robb fought for justice, whereas Daenerys fought for control of a place she had never been to just because her father owned it. Um, hmm. Hmm. I mean, well, there's a two different questions, like entitled versus like, and then making a comparison to Rob's like cause and saying that like her cause is less just than Rob's. Like those are two separate things. Um, I mean, first of all, I've heard George himself call Viserys entitled. And so, yeah, this belief that you require the Iron Throne, um, and that it's all yours and you want it back, at least according to George, is entitlement that you think you ought to be ruling. Um, but what's very strange is that like that's Stannis's fucking fight too, and Renly's fight, and like um so why Daenerys is getting singled out here is suspicious. Okay, when you ask me this question, like why aren't what like do people sit around and call Stannis entitled? Um, like, uh, but also like, is this what Daenerys is doing? Daenerys has not taken any action to take the Seven Kingdoms. Um, she's she's she liberated the slaves not to take the Seven Kingdoms. She liberated the slaves because she thought slavery was wrong, and she like took over Marine and wanted to rule and learn how to be a queen. Um, she has not yet taken any action to take back the Seven Kingdoms. Well, Stannis very much has. So it's a little odd that she's being singled out here, compared to any of the other characters. Like any of them, all of the characters think that they are the actual rulers. Um, of this. So now Rob's now you want to like compare it to like Rob's situation. Okay, Rob's situation is fighting for justice. Well, he's fighting for revenge, right? Um, Ned did try to overthrow the kingdom. Like there was a coup. Okay. Um, Now you could argue that there's a lot of factors involved here, and that Joffrey is actually a bastard and things like this, defending divine rights and all the true-born marriages and all these incredibly important things, that certainly mean that hundreds of thousands of millions of people should die, because people happen to be married or whatever. Um, but like Rob's out for revenge. Okay, let's not call it justice. Okay, let's call it revenge. Um, Daenerys's uh, fight would also be one of revenge, right? She's trying to take out the usurpers and the usurpers' dogs. She has a lot of people that were involved in killing her family. A lot of people should die, based on that, right? Like the Baratheons killed her brother, and the Lannisters killed her father, and they killed her her brother and her niece and nephew. Um, and they sent hired knives after them to follow them around for years as they went from place to place. And so, I mean, do I think that like Daenerys's lame this like desire to be the monarch of a kingdom is better than Rob's lame desire to be a monarch, and that her vengeance is somehow less than Rob's vengeance. Like, no, they're just there's nothing fucking moral about any of these fucking people, okay? Like, what do you like I mean, I'm not gonna, it's just, I just find it weird and suspicious that Danny is like singled out here and not Stannis. Um, it's that's the thing. So, um, no, I think she's entitled as she's as entitled as any of the other motherfucking highborn pieces of shit in the story. Okay, like all of them are entitled. All of them are entitled. Come on. Um, a thing that always annoyed me was how people act like Theon pooped the bed by taking Winterfell. This was, in my opinion, the only way that Balon could have pulled off a strategic win over the North. Thoughts? So a lot of people point to Balon's war as being asinine. And I don't think it's as dumb as people think it is. Because the North is really, really, really hard to invade because of the neck. And Balon is smart enough to take the neck. So once he takes the neck, then he's taking lots of land. And the question is like, does he want to hold the entire North, or does he want to bargain with Tywin for independence, pieces of the North or whatever? Is it a negotiation tactic, or is he actually trying to conquer the North and keep the North? So he didn't think, he wanted, his strategy was don't go far from the sea, because then, you can just take something and then negotiate and then run away if you happen to lose, which was Balon's strategy. Theon's strategy, look, Theon was very impressive in his taking of Winterfell. But even if you take away the Ramsay situation, Roderick would have fucking taken that castle back. The North would have taken that fucking castle back, and Theon would be dead. So it was a dumb move. Like, Theon's move was dumb. He could not hold Winterfell with the amount of men he had. It was meanwhile, like, when you talk about the other people, Victarion and Asha and the Stony Shore, like, yeah, if people come and there's too many of them, heck, jump back in your ships, you're gone. It's easy as that. Though Asha, I mean, admittedly, Asha was not able to do that, but she should have. She should have. She should have been more on high alert. So, I mean, it all depends what Balon's like goal is. Was it about negotiation? Because he does try to negotiate later he does try to negotiate with Tywin, and Tywin kind of says, why would I negotiate with them? I don't need to. So I don't think Balon's plan was necessarily bad. He had if it weren't for him dying in the Kingsmoot just being the worst situation ever for them. Like, everybody pulling out to do the Kingsmoot. But it was a sound strategy. You keep Moat Cailin, and you can then everything is negotiable at that point. Like, we've got these bargaining chips. So I don't know. It's that's the thing is, was his goal a strategic win over the North? No, there's no way. There's no way they could have won over the North. Period. None. Zero chance. Zero chance of winning the North ever. So you have it has to be like a negotiation tactic. Like, I'm going to conquer this far, and then we're going to stop war by you giving us some land. Either negotiating with the North or negotiating with Taiwan if he won the war. Um, so I mean, I've heard a lot of people complain about Balon that his plan is dumb. I don't think it's that dumb. I think it was now, is Theon's plan smarter? Yeah, probably. Theon's plan, or his original plan, was attack Casterly Rock and then eliminate the Lannisters and then have Robb give you the Iron Islands. Yeah, no, that was Theon's plan was like Theon's first plan, not taking whatever. Theon's first plan was much better, and Balon was an idiot for being like that gold price, iron price bullshit. Like, that was dumb. Had the Iron Islands joined Robb, yeah, game over, man. That would have been fucking great. They would have gotten their independence just like Robb promised them. No, man, that was. And who knows? I think Theon thought he was going to get Casterly Rock or something crazy like that. Much better. Theon's first plan was much better, but wasn't Balon's plan wasn't horrible. But yeah, no, you should have gone with Theon's plan. Theon's plan was much better. Uh, 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 uh. No slop. There's zero slop in a Storm of Swords. Zero slop. Zero slop. Great and sloppy, just the way we like it. Yeah. Um. Preston, are you proud of the new wave of A Song of Ice and Fire YouTubers like Quinn and Haven and all the others? I mean, people are excited and they're making good videos that people are enjoy. That's fantastic. It's fantastic that people are really people are still into it and having a good time with it. The whole thing is just if you're having fun um, and you're analyzing the text and getting stuff out of it, that's great. You Hi Preston, how are you finding the reception of your book? I think most people that have read it and have talked to me, they really like it, which is fantastic. I think probably the nicest reception I got was from my sister who read it and really liked it, and she's really critical. So I was like, oh, that made me feel really good. So yeah, I haven't met anyone that has not liked it, or no one's told me anything that they haven't liked it. So that's a good thing. So I'm happy. I think, having read it a million times now, like, I do kind of like, I'm somewhat confident on its quality. Like, I know it's at a certain level of quality. Like, I think if someone came to me and said this book is horrible for this and this reason, I'd be like, you didn't read my fucking book. Like there's at some point I have some confidence on it. So I don't know. I think it's but I do like it when obviously everybody likes it when getting praise, but I do like it when people are like, oh, I read your book, it was really great. It's like, oh, thank you. Getting people to read it is the hard part. But yeah, it's funny when you know when you do good work and when you do bad work. It's like, I can look back at some of my videos and I know which ones are good, like really good ones, and which ones are the, so, and which ones are bad and that kind of stuff. Um, oh, hey Preston, on an end of an amazing road trip across France, Paris to Mont Saint Michel, which is 100% Casterly Rock. Normandy for D-Day, Dunkirk, in Bastogne, Belgium now, then back to Paris and home to Boston. Bucket list trip. Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, no, I mean, um, still like 19-year-old Preston, like traveling across Europe, like I still have very burned in my head the first time I saw Mont Saint Michel because like you have to go to this town, Pontorson, and I think I was too cheap. I didn't have any money to like take a bus or take a taxi or whatever. So I walked to Mount Saint Michel, and I think it was like 9 miles or something strange like that. And so I remember just walking across like French farmland and just like eventually coming over the hill to the ocean and seeing Mont Saint Michel and being like like just blown away, like oh my god, like um and then I think about halfway, I think about at that point of the trip, like some random French family like just pulled over and picked me up and took me the rest of the way. But it's definitely like a favorite moment in my head. Um, I do remember my ATM card wouldn't work and I was starving and I didn't have any money and I went into a grocery store and I stole a can of sardines and then and then I ate this can of sardines that I'd stolen, and then later I tried a different ATM and it worked, and then I went back to the same grocery store and bought more food. But yeah, these things. But man, it's a very beautiful area. Uh, uh, uh. You reckon Varys and Illyrio ever hooked up? I don't know. I mean, I'm convinced that Varys has testicles, but I'm not sure Illyrio is physically capable of sex. I mean, when they were younger, like when they were skinnier, I don't know. Maybe. Um, Oh, Valyrian steel versus crucible steel. European forges couldn't get hot enough to liquefy slag-free steel till 1800 industrial age. Old world tech, perhaps? Huh. I've heard of Damascus steel, which is what I thought um, Valyrian steel is based on, because Damascus steel also has like the swirls in it and shit. Um, huh. This also seems to have the same weird pattern in it. Crucible steel. Oh, is there no difference? Oh, they're used interchangeably. Crucible steel and Damascus steel are used interchangeably? Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's weird that there's two separate Wikipedia articles. Oh, it's just a Damascus. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, supposedly the recipe for Damascus steel is gone, like, and or whatever, and so like people can't people can't do it anymore in the same way that like with Valyrian steel. I mean, I think it's the same kind of like idea, um, that it was like lost technology, and they don't know how they did it. Loss of technique, declined. But but I mean, clearly Valyrian steel is something even more. Like Valyrian steel never gets dull. It's super light, things like that. I think it's sort of because it's like wildfire being based on Greek fire and things like that. Um, he's taking something from our world and then like making it extreme. So yeah, obviously Valyrian steel is based on Crucible steel, Damascus steel, but I think in description they're remarkably different. Like, Damascus steel, Crucible steel is like marginally better than regular steel, while Valyrian steel is like an entire world better than regular steel. Let's see here. Uh, 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 uh. Baby Dragon's got 1,200 attack points. It's true. It's true. Brienne blesses Jaime under the Even Star Moon Knight. I have to check. Oh, does she like pray? Um. Trying to remember this. Like, what's the even star Moon Knight? I'm trying to remember like what this moonlight is, where they're blessed. Um, I mean, in the moonlight, Jaime receives his vision to go to rescue Brienne, and um, and Jaime fights with Ilyn Payne in the moonlight, and then moonlight is when they're at the inn at the Kneeling Man. Oh, I'm not sure. Winds of Winter is cursed. It's true. But I can't think of any like legitimate blessings. Were the hired knives a fiction by Illyrio to keep Vizzy and Danny moving so they'd be humble like Aegon 2? Obviously failed with Viserys. Well, this is a hard question because certainly when the story is first told by Viserys, I mean, when Danny talks about it, she says, I never saw any hired knives. So you're absolutely supposed to believe that Viserys is being paranoid when Danny first brings it up. But later on, you do hear that like Robert was looking to hire assassins, and that he couldn't get to them because they were hiding behind Illyrio's walls and things like that. So but then you also hear about Jon Arryn not wanting to do the assassinations. So you get a bit of a bit of a contradiction. But were there actually people following him around hired knives that wanted to kill them? It's strange that they would fail that often, like what does explain them hopping from place to place so much? I mean, like the problem is we're getting all sorts of different descriptions, like different explanations. Okay, so in one sense, they hop around from place to place because they wear out their welcome and they have to leave. But then, um, but at the same time, like Viserys legitimately seems paranoid and seems scared of the hired knives. And, you know, they definitely talk about running from place to place. And so Viserys seemed to believe they were there. But then again, once he had a place where he could stay like 6 months, like at Lyrio's Manse or whatever, like that was fine too. And keep in mind that was shortened. In the original text, it was like a year. So if Viserys is paranoid, he should have run from Illyrio's Manse too, right? You know, like, I do think the hired knives were probably real. I don't know if they were Robert's. You know, some people think that perhaps the hired knives were like Doran Martell keeping an eye on him, or or Varys keeping an eye on him, or that they were pushing them from place to place specifically so they couldn't actually establish ties because the Aegon cause was the real cause. And so he was like, Varys was purposely trying to weaken their cause by, you know, he's like building relationships. Viserys is building relationships, and let's cut him off and pretend there's a hired knife. And now he's got to move on. So I mean, I might be biased because like Harry Lloyd like makes you like Viserys more than maybe you should, but I tend to think that Viserys is less crazy than he is. I think all of the characters are less crazy than they're made out to be. That, you know, like with the Mad King, how it's like, oh, he was paranoid. He was thinking that people were going to overthrow him. Well, they were trying to overthrow him. Like he wasn't actually being paranoid. You know, I tend to think that like when they describe all these characters as crazy, that they're not actually crazy. That they actually have legitimate concerns. So I will say I do think somebody was following around Viserys. Do I think it was Robert? Do I think it was Varys? Do I think it was the Dornish? I don't know, but I think somebody was there. I think they were real. Yeah, but certainly it's introduced as a paranoia. But Danny and everyone in Westeros thinking slavery is barbaric, and somehow they all still think the medieval feudal system and the serfdom is neat. Yeah, well, you know, humans are hypocrites, right? You know, this. I mean, I think just the head of DHS, like she complained about like Biden using the National Guard and now Trump's using the National Guard. I mean, all these people are hypocrites. Everybody's a hypocrite, right? You know, so it's kind of the same situation. Like slavery is barbaric and horrible, but they're doing something just as bad as slavery, and yet they don't see how ridiculous it is. You know, I've heard arguments, for example, about, I would say like most Westerners, they look at Middle Eastern polygamy and they think it's kind of barbaric. Like, oh, you know, guys can have like 4 wives. That's freaking crazy. That they just get tired of their wife, so they hire out a new one. And you know, the response is, well, wait a minute, in the West, don't you just get divorced? And then you just get married to a second one? At least in the Middle East, you're like financially have to care for the first wife. You know, and not throw her out and like move on to your new trophy wife. When you get the new trophy wife, the other wife is financially supported, you know, and you're like, okay, you know, it's like, I understand there's other factors going on there, but like I can understand now that like is our system of people just like disposing of wives any different than polygamy? Or disposing of partners any different than polygamy, where you're just picking up partners or whatever. You know, I would still be against just because it's sexist in the Middle East. Like, women, if women could have four husbands, maybe you could make the argument. But the fact that only men can do it would be. But nonetheless, like, we're all blinded by our by where we're from. Um, when I lived in China, the Chinese, they uh, were legitimately horrified by the notion that we sent our elderly to old folks' homes. They thought that was horrible. They were like, you lock up your old folks in prisons. And it's like, well, they're not exactly prisons, you know. You're like, you know, but like, you get the hint of it. You're like, oh, but we don't sit here and scold ourselves over our old folks very much in America. We just don't think about them. We just dismiss them, and we're like, oh, maybe they are kind of locked up in prisons, you know. And yet we criticize China over something else, you know, their lack of freedom of speech or whatever. But, you know, they'll turn around and be like, you guys treat your elderly really poorly in America. Yeah, it's true. We do try to treat our elderly kind of poor, but we're all blinded by our own culture. We just think it's normal. And so, and we're really quick to judge others. Religion led to the rational reasoning for anti-slavery. I mean, slavery. If there was one time in history where religious zealots did the right thing, it was the religious zealots that like drove the anti-slavery movement in America in the 1850s. It's I'll grant like the one moment in history where like religious zealots were on the right side, and only some religious zealots, because obviously religion was also used to justify slavery because it's condoned in the Bible. But it's but it was religious zealots that were on the forefront of the anti-slavery movement. I'm friends with a couple, Don and Lan, who had a bad breakup. Any advice? Oh, because you're friends with both of them. Yeah, you know, I have never been able to remain friends with both people in a breakup. Um, I've even been in situations where I was really good friends with one. They became a couple. There was a breakup, and I stayed friends with the other. Like, you know, and it just depends on like where you are in life and what you have in common and the circumstances of the breakup, like who wins whom in the breakup and things like that. Um, I mean, my advice is like, you know, you play it by ear, and you kind of see who's important to you, and who's if they're which of them is more important to you, and if you're important to them, and you try to figure out the like what makes sense. But it's more of a practical thing. Who is messaging me? I just had um I heard a couple like doo-doo-doo-doots. So, is my Discord on? Oh, it is. That's why. I'm not fucking quitting my Discord because that's too much. Okay. But yeah, no, that's my advice, is that all you can do is play it by ear and see what's practical. Cuz like, here's the thing, is you can like from the get-go be like, well, this person's a better friend to me, I'm going to choose them in the breakup. But like, you know, in the end, like something might weird happen, like the one person moves away, or you know, you're both busy and you don't run into each other and things like that, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, you chose the wrong person. But you need to like play it by ear. What's going on here? What's Carmine sending me? What's Carmine sending me? Oh, god damn it! I'm being really dumb. So Carmine let me know that I'm being an idiot because he's talking about his friends Trump and Elon, Don and Elon. All right, egg on my face that I didn't get that. Sorry. Um, Look, all we can on that breakup. All you can do is get your popcorn and hope it works out for everybody the best. I mean, our whole thing is that we hope that the bill gets crushed um, and that Elon tries to embarrass Trump as much as possible, pull away voters or something. Um, but yeah, no. But yeah, I look really dumb for not catching that. But yeah, no, I mean it's funny. It's great. It's great. We all knew it was coming, but oh, if if um I we still have America's still screwed. I mean, we can enjoy this like moment of them fighting, but man, is America still screwed. Um, Ulfbert's sword was a legendary sword from the Viking era made of ingots of crucible steel that were imported to Europe from India. Crucible equals Damascus. Yes. Yeah, no, it's interesting that that they ran like they couldn't figure out how to do Damascus steel anymore, and therefore they were like reforging swords with the material, just like in the same sense of like reforging ice into um, uh, Widow's Wail and um, Oathkeeper. Thoughts on the Dornish letter to Aegon and the Diddy trial? Um, so I think you mean Aegon the First and like why he stopped the war. I mean, the only thing that I think makes sense is the fact that they actually had Rhaenys as a hostage. I think it's the only thing that makes sense of something that's private that immediately ends the war is that they have Rhaenys as a hostage. I think it's the only thing. Um, but I mean, it's very brief that they bring it up, and you're just like, well, what else? What else? What else could it be? Like, nothing else really makes any sense, um, other than we have her, and you better stop, or else we're gonna torture the hell out of her. And the Diddy trial, I mean, guy needs to go to prison, probably, probably, probably Diddy. I mean, I haven't really been following it, but it's just everybody says he was had underage trafficking. So it sounds like the guy needs to go to prison. Diddy was always Diddy was always a fucking idiot. Um, Vari's tongueless little birds don't speak the common tongue. They can't copy text, know their letters. They can't read common tongue either. I think learning their letters, I think they had to have, huh? They had to have at least like listened to the common tongue. I mean, there's no point for them. Hmm. Know their. This is the thing: is what's the phrase? Know their letters. Does that just mean that they're like transcribing them letter by letter, like single letter by letter? Because that's really difficult. Because our brain processes words at a time, and they're just going letter by letter. Um, Know their letters. Just try to think about what makes sense here. So, I mean, if they're just children who don't even speak the common tongue, who are like running around stealing letters or copying them over, that's a really limited use. You know, like at least have them know the common tongue so they can be in the walls and listen to shit and then like write it down. Because in the end, what in Aria 3, he says in Aria 3 he says the ones you need are hard to find, so young to know their letters, perhaps older, not die so easy. um what he's talking about, what kids know their letters, probably like know their letters, like they can draw them pretty well at like age 4 to 5. Is he saying that he's getting like 4 to 5 year old little birds? But wasn't he also complaining about the cost? I feel like if they were just knowing their letters, it would be cheaper, right? I don't know. He's like he also says if they kept their tongues. Um Let me bring up the. Now I gotta read that again. Like if they're really just like one language, know their letters. That's the thing, is the ones you need are hard to find, so young and to know their letters. So I think if it was only knowing the letters, they wouldn't be so hard to find. I think what he's talking about is like fully literate, common tongue speaking. Like that makes them hard to find. If they were all just illiterate, like it may be, I admit that it may be that they don't know the common tongue very well and they're just doing letter shit. But you know, it has to be, they have to have a skill that's at least a little hard to do, right? No, because knowing your letters, that's not very hard. Like my 2-year-old knows his letters. He can't draw them very well, but like he can, once you get to like 4, drawing letters is pretty easy. And so there, everybody could draw the letters. And I don't know if Valyrian, we're never told if Valyrian and Common use the same alphabet, are we? But assuming they use the same alphabet, any like child that can recognize his letters would be common enough. So they wouldn't be hard to find. So they need to at least have some skill that makes them exceptional. Um, and so I think either full literacy or knowing the common tongue as a second language or something. There needs to be something more because otherwise they wouldn't be very hard to find. Like young children that know their letters, just throw a rock, you're gonna hit a kid that knows his letters. Um, that can copy letters over again. They have to have more skill than that, or else they wouldn't be hard to find. Don't exes get alimony? Alimony kind of doesn't exist anymore, by the way. Um, it's just yeah, it's just it was a thing. It was a thing previously, but now it's the alimony doesn't really. I mean, alimony like you might get like child support, but you don't you don't get alimony's not really a thing anymore. You might find it here or there. I mean, people you have to prove that like I stopped my career in order to support this other person's career, and we just don't do that anymore. Like how many you just don't have stay at homes like that often, you know. Um, mm, 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 mm. Bible thumpers, Captain Marsh. That is true. That is something in Fever Dream. Abner Marsh does uh, comment on the Bible thumping aspects of that. Mm, mm, mm. Let's see here. Sorry, I might have to survive the National Guard. Hope everyone else is doing well. Jeez. Is Elon vindictive enough to give hundreds of millions to Dems? I don't think so. I think he'd be the type to give money to like uh, um, Ron DeSantis or something. Like you just find another Republican that suits him. I mean, the effect might be the same. Like he might tear off votes, but I really hope Stephen Miller is mad. I really hope that the rumors are true that Stephen Miller's wife is fucking Elon. I fucking I fucking really hope that's true. That Stephen Miller's wife is fucking Elon Musk. Oh, spending tonight. Will ice be reforged in a dream of spring? Huh. I'm trying to think about how likely that would be to reforge it. Um, I mean, it wouldn't be. It would be the wrong color again, right? It changes colors once it gets reforged. But could you reforge ice? I mean, they're not that far from each other, right? Widow's Wail is probably with Tommen, and Oathkeeper is in the Riverlands. They're not very far apart. It's not like we brought one to a different continent or anything like that. Um, yeah, would someone take the time? The thing is ice is not a very practical sword, so you'd have to have somebody like who had all this who wants to put the ceremony back in and reforge it back together again. Hmm. That's an interesting question. I've never thought about that. No one ever um no one's ever asked that before. I could, if it happened, it would be in one of those like appendices, like the very end of the story. Bran becomes king and orders the swords to be reforged or something, um, something like that. But to have it reforged, huh? I never thought about that. Um, will they get around to it? I mean, we're never going to get the Dream of Spring, so they're never going to be reforged. I mean, let's be honest. Let's. Mm, mm. Yeah, Trump still keeps denying his relationship with Epstein despite evidence to the contrary. His worshippers still believe him. Of course. I mean, do I think that Trump was partaking in the child prostitution of Epstein? Probably not. I mean, he was using other prostitutes, but knowing Trump's type, like Trump's type is not necessarily that we know of. So I don't think we have any evidence that Trump was having sex with underage people, but he he was always using sex workers. I mean, he was always partaking in sex workers. So I don't know. I don't think we're gonna find, look, if it comes out that Trump did that, the you know, I don't want to say good, but like you know, it, it wouldn't surprise me, but I don't think we have any evidence of it. There's a lot of bad things I can say about Trump, but we don't really have any evidence that he's been a pedophile. You know, he's been a horrible person in a million other ways. But he hung out with Epstein. A lot of people hung out with Epstein. Da, da, da. The Valerians use hieroglyphs. Do they? I have to look this up. And also, like, even if they used hieroglyphs, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're current or like historically. It doesn't necessarily mean that they use it now. I mean, lots of languages change their alphabet. Um, um, like, modern day Vietnamese or modern day Korean, Romanian exists in two different alphabets. Like there's Romanian in Cyrillic script, and there's Romanian in Romance script. Um, but let me see here. Do they use hieroglyphs? Like, what is it, right? Da, da, da. High Valyrian. They keep bringing up like real High Valyrian when I look up this. I'm like, I don't, or the created for the show kind of thing. Some of the oldest remaining ancient texts are in High Valyrian. It's the most spoken. Do they even is it in glyphs? Here we go. The Valyrian writing system, at least a Valyrian writing system, it is described as glyphs. Oh, okay. It's probably standardized, written in scroll. The glyphs can be inscribed as an old Valyrian dragon horn. Okay, yes, those would be the glyphs. She says, oh, they have a Danny 1 describing it as glyphs. But like the Egyptian language, for instance, went from hieroglyphics specifically to a different alphabet kind of thing. Like on the Rosetta Stone, you've got like the other one. But let me see about this. They're still using. Here we go. Ancient Valyrian glyphs. So they always say ancient. So there can be a difference. It may We don't know what modern Valyrian is doing, but I mean, you're right that like ancient Valyrian used glyphs, but we don't know about modern. Because like when you look on the like the Rosetta Stone, so it has hieroglyphs, but then it has something called Demotic. And Demotic Egyptian was like this Egyptian script that was later, like that was later an alphabet. Because let's be honest, like hieroglyphs suck as a language system. This was like what the Egyptians like switched to later on. When the communists took over in China, there was actually talk of switching over to Pinyin as like the regular writing system, which probably would have been better. I mean, but or like the Korean language used to use Chinese, the Chinese language, Vietnamese as well, and they eventually like switched over. The Koreans inventing their own, Vietnamese using Roman letters now. So maybe it's interesting that we don't. Yeah, what do they use? They might use. Trump likes bimbo for. Vast majority of medieval population is illiterate. Kids that can read and write are very rare. Now the thing is, I think in Westeros he's made it more rare than the real world, because in the real world it turns out that like literacy came in different forms. Like being able to write your name, to physically write your name, is something that most people were able to do, and like being able to like see the word chicken and beef and like know what the word, like the things you'd actually see in the day, like, oh, that's well, they didn't have potatoes, but like, that's wheat, that's onion, that's like you could recognize a few basic words, the words that you're going to use. I mean, like, what is literacy? Do you mean like they're sitting around and like reading text? Because the only texts that were around were in Latin anyway. Like no one was sitting around writing texts in whatever language they were speaking in the Middle Ages. Like, like literacy a lot of times meant like, were you taught Latin, and can you read Latin, and can you read ancient Greek? Like literacy meant a whole fucking slew of different things at different times. Because that's the thing, is like being literate, and say you're in medieval Spain, in whatever 1200, okay, and you speak some sort of weird, it's not the language they speak in Toledo, and it's not the language they speak in Barcelona, and it's not the language they speak in Sevilla. You're in some village and you speak some sort of weird Spanish hybrid that's like a dialect, and there's no written form of that. And maybe, there might be some, even if there were a written form, no one's going around writing books, in it. And so being literate meant like you knew Latin and shit. So there's a lot of weirdness to what it meant to be literate. And that doesn't apply to the world of Ice and Fire. Ice and Fire doesn't make sense because in the world of Ice and Fire, everybody speaks the same fucking language. So it's nothing like Europe in any respect. And seems to be that things are written in the common tongue as well, which is not like Europe in any respect. Like, when you think about literacy today, like we kind of forget that like it's a remarkable place in America that our spoken language is so close to our written language, because that is not the case in many parts of the world. Like modern standard Arabic is completely different than what people speak in the Middle East. Um, but there is no written Jordanian Arabic, and there is no written Iraqi Arabic. Like you just, that doesn't exist. So you've got this gulf between what is written and what is spoken. Or written Chinese is remarkably different from spoken Chinese. Um, there's this huge gulf between them. But there's not that huge gulf with English. Like we can all kind of like understand it a little bit. Like we say the word a lot, but if you're writing something for work, you would never write a lot. But you'd never say we don't speak the word much, but we write the word much. You never say, oh, there's much trouble out there. No, there's a lot of trouble. Like, so we can understand that there is gulf between spoken and written English, but it's so small compared to other languages and at other times in history. So like Middle Ages, like you're speaking your local language, but to be literate meant what? Like knowing Latin? Like it's such a weird thing. But then it just doesn't apply to Ice and Fire. There's no reason that there should be such widespread illiteracy in Westeros when everyone fucking speaks the common tongue and the written language is fucking common. Like that's ridiculous. That's ridiculous that no one does. Not to mention that there's like septons everywhere and they have a holy book and it's like getting spread everywhere. Like the 7-pointed star is actually pretty famous and it's everywhere. It's not like now I'm on this rant. Like, keep in mind that like there was a long time before the Bible was even allowed to be in English. Right? Like the Bible was like, oh, do you speak Greek? Like, do you speak Latin? Because that's what the Bible's in. Like, and religion was like the primary way in which literacy like spread, right? So if the 7-pointed star is in common and the septons are everywhere and they're speaking common and everybody in the whole fucking continent speaks common, like everybody should be fucking literate. Like this shouldn't be that fucking hard. But it's whatever. Did you study linguistics? I did not, but as it happens, my sister is a PhD linguist, so this subject comes up a lot. So, yeah, Turkish too. Switched from Arabic. Isn't Kazakhstan recent? I think Kyrgyzstan did it or Kyrgyzstan did it a while back, and I think Kazakhstan might want to switch. Just a lot of these are political statements, Let's see. Ancient Chinese secret. Yeah, bro, I can barely read English. Boltons have Robb's head. Ramsay will wear it, faceless man style, in the Battle of Winterfell. John's dream is foreshadowing thoughts. So there is some discussion of like what happened to Robb's head. Because Robb's body, I think, was just dumped in the river with the wolf head on it. But then some people are like, shouldn't the wolf head be too big? And it's like, I don't know. The show kind of made us think that the werewolves are much the werewolves are the dire wolves, I mean, the dire the dire wolves are bigger than they should be, but I don't know how big their head. So there's a theory going around that they couldn't that Grey Wind is still alive. And the proof that Grey Wind is still alive is that they when they beheaded Rob and they sewed on his wolf head, that didn't make sense because his wolf head should be too big. And so sewing it on is kind of a ridiculous notion. But then there's like, well, how big is a dire wolf? How big is that head? I don't know. This is Storm of Swords stuff again, so it's sloppy, right? But I think Rob's body is just like dumped in the river. They probably just tossed his head in the river too. So I don't think that Rob's head was brought back with the Boltons. And so there are some theories that like Rob's head was put on Sir Robert Strong and things like that. But it's just a mystery. But yeah, as in John's dream foreshadowing, because John has this dream of becoming Lord of Winterfell, and he would battle Rob in the snow over it or whatever. Like, you can't be Lord of Winterfell, you're a bastard, kind of thing. So I mean, there's a lot there. Could Ramsay wear it Faceless Man style? Probably not. Probably not. But like, would the flesh stay on it? Like, someone at the Twins would have had to like preserve his skin and like get it off Faceless Man style so that Ramsay would wear it. But Ramsay's not trained in a Faceless Man sense. So, I mean, these are all like, interesting ideas, but like once you start thinking about it, like one, like, where is Rob's head? Is it not in a pauper's grave? Was it not tossed in the river? No, someone took it and like carefully removed the face. Why? So that it could be worn later for fun, Oh, that's true. Jackie makes a good point. He was going in those dressing rooms in the Miss Teen USA pageant. That was pretty creepy. Okay, there. I guess that's some evidence. Uh, yeah, in Brazilian Portuguese has some differences between formal writing and spoken. Yeah, and I think even today, because we're so much more of a now that we're communicating with written writing more. I wonder if the gap is closing. I mean, when I left the room earlier, I actually said like, BTW, right? Or I'm sorry, I said BTB, be right back, B BRB, be right back. Um, but people start taking these like verbal slang phrases and making them written and back and forth. Um, our written and spoken language have probably are probably closer now than they've ever been. Um, but yeah, it's a weird time. It's a weird time with language. I had a discussion today um, with an older gentleman who was talking about how he is in the 70s, and he was talking about how when he was young, they purposely did not learn how to type as men. I mean, he was making this comment because he realized how screwed up it was. Because the idea is that men didn't need to learn how to type because you'd always have a secretary like to do your typing, like, and so today he's a horrible typist, and he's like, because they just didn't push the skill on men, because it was just computers, like typewriters and computers were originally the women's domain. Like, computer programming was a very female dominated profession. And then a shift happened in the 80s. But very funny though, that, like, you never need to know how to to type and write. Now everybody is writes pretty fast and is communicating more on through text than they are speech than speaking. Wasn't Bolton very surprised Arya can read, or am I misremembering something? Um, that sounds like something that could be in there. Let me see here. That'd be it would be near the end of Clash, right? When Arya crosses over with Roose Bolton. I mean, this might also be like a book to show thing. I can't. Anyway, I don't see anything. Yeah, I don't see anything on it. Might be a show thing or something. On Arya's reading. That's also like that's where like the contradiction comes in, where like she's using my lord, and then he doesn't call her out on it, but then he calls Theon out on it in A Dance with Dragons, and you're like, come on. Comes to the theory that Roose Bolton knew it was Arya the whole time, or knew it was a highborn girl the whole time, or something. Thoughts on King's Land? On Euron going to King's Landing instead of Old Town? I don't know. I mean, because like in the show, because he goes straight to King's Landing in the show, and attacks Daenerys in the gullet and things like that. While in the book, he's in Old Town. I think the disparity is if I were to guess, that Cersei, the show obviously doesn't have Aegon, and so young Griff is at some point going to take King's Landing. And so I would assume that Cersei would flee to the west at some point, and then at that point, like Cersei would have an alliance with Euron once she makes it to Casterly Rock or something. And without Aegon, you didn't need to move Cersei from King's Landing, so you just kind of have Euron go to King's Landing instead, and then just remove the Old Town plot. But I mean, I think in book I think it's certainly George's plan to have Euron attack King's Landing. I think that's pretty. I think that's fairly certain, just because we kind of know that the Battle of Blood is going to happen at the Straits. I mean, we're all geared up for it at the end of the Aeron sample chapter. All the prophecy talks about the three towers and things like that. So I think it's pretty certain that he's at least going to have the Battle of Blood in the Straits, and then why wouldn't you attack Old Town at that point? But I think that the discrepancy in the show is just because you remove Aegon, and Cersei is in a different location. Bernard suits definition of a game. The voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles makes me love Sir Arlen. He seems un-Machiavellian. I mean, I certainly don't know this Bernard Suits philosopher. Voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles. Huh. I mean, Arlen, I think in the end is just kind of the classic example of you know a true knight trying to get by. I mean, I think that everything that Sir Arlen is the fact that he took in Dunk and took care of him, and that like and taught him a way to survive in the world and things like that. And I think that's like all that's kind of important, is that it's, he decided to protect somebody, and he decided to try to make the world a better place in a very small way. And so I think Sir Arlen is I think he's a good guy. He loved to tell stories, and he loved the camaraderie and friendship and all of that kind of stuff. Um, he's very almost un Game of Thrones, like Sir Arlen is so different from every other knight in Ice and Fire, right? Like that he's actually a good guy, and that makes knighthood seem good, and makes honor seems good. So um the vision of the House of the Undying showed a man with a wolf's head wielding a leg of lamb. The only person at the Red Wedding with a leg of lamb was Wendell Manderley. It seems like GW's head was put on Wendell. That's interesting. Yeah. So then you've got. I mean, he's a big fat dude, so he could take a big fat head. Um, but and it would be equivalent size, right? But they're not making any mistake here. I mean, why would you not use Rob's body when you have Rob's body? I mean, Rob is definitely killed. We see him killed, but um, you know, like how do they screw it up is the question. We see, the thing is, we don't see Greywind dead, so the idea that it's not Greywind's head has a little more possibility. But we see Rob die. Like, why wouldn't they do something? What else are they going to do with his body? The leg of lamb. I mean, Danny's visions at the House of the Undying, like all of them are screwed up. All of them are really weird. There's always something. There's something wrong with all of them. So, mm, Barbary, Dustin, and Benjamin were hooking up. That's a new. Oh, hey Preston! Recently discovered your channel because of Quinn the GM and binge listening to your the Winds of Winter fanfic. Great work. Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I do spend a lot of my free time like thinking about the fanfic and how writing and editing on it. It's something we're working on. Hopefully, in 5 years or so, we'll have it done. I'm not sure, but it's but I do appreciate it. It's weird to get a new fan. I usually just think I have all of my people that have been with me for since the pink letter, like things like that. Old video of mine. Um, by the way, 100 Years of Solitude is such a weird book. I find it, and I don't necessarily think like any English version probably does it justice, because like I tried to read it in Spanish once, and I was like, oh my god, like the words he's using are not regular words, and I realized like, oh, it's like so much poetry in it, and so like no English translation is gonna capture that. But then also, it's really weird because he has major events kind of happen in the middle of paragraphs. So like a character will disappear for like hundreds of pages, and then they'll return, but in the middle of a paragraph, and so you kind of miss it. And then you're like, wait, when did this guy come back? And you're like going back and be like, fuck, what happened? And it's like, oh, in the middle of the fucking paragraph, they just mentioned that this character that's been gone 10 years is now returned. And you're like, well, fuck. It's such a weird fucking book. Um, we should all just use Esperanto. That is true. That is true. Huh, being a wolf historically, it's like being a bad temper, wife beater. That's true. I don't know if like I kind of think George makes a lot of comments about like the wolf and the bat, like the Harrenhal stuff, like, and but that gets into his like vampire stuff from Fever Dream. So I don't know if he was thinking like how much he was thinking about it earlier on, or like when he first when did he first establish the bat of Harrenhal? But I thought it was really weird when I read Fever Dream and they're talking about the wolf and the bat and it being the same thing, and like werewolves and vampires being the same thing. And I was like, that's really odd considering the Stark family is wolf and bat. Um, but here we go. The theory is Roose remembers that his cupbearer said "my lord," and he's chastising Reek because, and that's why he chuckles to himself. Oh, that he like missed it. Like maybe he realized it later after she was gone, and he was like, "Fuck, I missed her. I'm not gonna make that mistake again." And then um, I'm gonna like chastise Theon over it. Um, or he let that one go. We should all use the metric system. Of course, we should all fucking use the metric system. There's a pretty funny SNL skit about how ridiculous like the American systems are. You know, they're like, you know, in America we're gonna use Fahrenheit, and he's like, how do you spell that? No one knows. You know, like shit, like you're like you're like, and we're gonna have a sport, and it's gonna be called football, and in this sport you're gonna throw things with your hands, and they're like, there's you don't use your feet in football, and it's like you use your feet a little bit. Like nothing makes sense. Like, there's a little bit of cooking, in football, a little bit. Oh man, yeah, Song for Leah is pretty good. I mean, if you're gonna read one thing from George R. R. Martin, it's gonna be Song for Leah. Um, what happened to Order of the Green Hand? I'm not sure. I thought they were still doing live streams every once in a while, but I think they probably got busy. Um, oh, Preston, what do you think that it's revealed that Maegor Brightflame was the Tattered Prince? What do you think would be Danny's reaction? um, I'm trying to think of like he's a. I'm trying to think he'd be a little old, right? Um, Maegor, son of Arian. I think we in the fanfic we call him Maegor the Sunbird. Um, I guess 68 years old. It's pretty. That's pretty ancient for for fighting. I mean, Barristan's like 62 or something, and he's considered ancient. So it would be hard to believe that this guy is still cell sorting around. I understand he has like silver hair and all, but um, I suppose it's technically possible. But you'd think it would come up. He'd mention that he's a Targaryen to somebody, because instead they describe him as being like non like having no interesting features. Well, Targaryens are striking, like they have striking features. So I mean, it'd be funny, but I don't think so. The Dream Songs books do not have all of George's short stories. They have his what he considers the best. There is a fan made complete Dream Songs that has them all, but um, I don't know. I mean, if you on look if you go on Carmine's Discord server and ask like, "Hey, can anyone set me up with like all of George's short stories?" I think we can probably get them to you if you want to find them all. But um, Dream Songs will get you about a quarter of them, you know. So and they're like the best ones, but you know you can do the search for everything and it's you'll find them. Some of them are interesting, but they're not as good. Um, Pressed off a bone to pick. Thought the Bard would be Hota convincing Darkstar to allyship, Arc reclaiming desires over name, defend, protect, obey. Yeah, I mean the Bard chapter is supposed to be Hota. It's going to be Hota and Darkstar at the Mother House. So the idea is that they're going to be we run into them in the Sam chapter, and then they're going to be in the Mother House, and you know we find out how they got there and like what they're doing. It's it's going to be a big one because we're gonna be talking like that chapter is going to be a storytelling chapter, and you know we're going to be talking about Ashara Dane and Heron Halterney, and we're gonna try to get that fucking shit sorted. So it's gonna be a big chapter. It's gonna be a an important chapter. But you know, Hota Darkstar, buddies together at a Mother House. Maybe it'll have Taisha. I don't know. Maybe it'll have Taisha. A lot of shit. A lot of shit could go down. Um, have you considered Mormont's Raven as a contemporary time traveling brand? I mean, I think the assumption is that like time traveling brand, yeah, is in a lot of these different things around. I think it only makes sense that it's time traveling brand in. I mean, it's either that or it's Bloodraven, right? But why is Bloodraven concerned with, say, like Jon Snow and all the stuff at the Wall? Like, we have no reason why Bloodraven would be concerned with that. While it makes sense for time traveling brand to be. So it's just, I mean, plus all the things that the Raven convinces people to do and things like that. When things start getting weird, like it seems that like the Raven convinces, like the mutiny at Craster's Keep and all sorts of stuff, and you're like, why would Bloodraven be doing that? Like, what's the logic in that? It makes more sense if it's time traveling Bran, or like starting the Great Ranging and things like that. Yeah, heard a theory that Howland Reed that it was Howland Reed that hooked up with Ashara Dane at the tourney, and Ashara is Mira and Jojen's mother. Maybe time traveling Brad involved. Now, so this theory comes out of the idea that when you go into the Bran story in A Storm of Swords, when Mira is telling the story, she says it's through Howland's point of view. So Howland is watching everybody, and he's watching Ashara dance with Oberyn and John Con and Brandon, and then Brandon goes over and has him talk to Ned. And you're kind of, the first time you read it, you're like, okay, this is about like their love story, like Ned and Ashara, but you can read this in like a couple different ways. You can say, well, Brandon's the one with the confidence. Like he went over there to talk to Ashara, but wouldn't Ashara be more attracted to Brandon's confidence than the shy kid? Like, let's be realistic. George writes realistic. George doesn't write like the nerd getting the girl, right? That's not George's style. George writes the nerd not getting the girl and fucking dying, you know? Like that's But then you can step back and go, well, wait a minute. The part that people are missing is Howland Reed is watching. So Howland Reed is spending the entire fucking evening watching Ashara Dane. So he's really like taken by her, right? Now, that's all well and good. And then once you've established that, like, okay, Howland Reed and Ashara Dane were the ones hooking up, well, then Mira is around the same age as John or something, and things like this. That maybe this was the whole thing. The problem with the theory is that, like, Ashara has no interest in Howland. Like, we don't hear any of that. There's no evidence of Ashara putting any interest in Howland. She puts interest in John Con and Oberyn and Ned and Brandon. So it does kind of come out with, like, yeah, Howland Reed can be in love with Ashara Dane all day long, but Ashara Dane was hot, but like there's no evidence that she was interested in Howland. And so the ages don't quite work out for Mira. Plus we hear in an appendix that the mother is Gianna, whoever that is. So that's where the theory comes from, but it's not necessarily there, so. Have you reconsidered any of your old theories? Do you have any old theories that you still stand by? And are there any that you think that have been completely off track? Thanks. Love your stuff. No, I mean, the thing with in general, and I think most of my fans kind of know this, but like in general, when I first read the series and we weren't waiting, it had only been a couple of years out and with no Winds of Winter, you really believe that George has all the answers and has thought everything out, and there's going to be this fucking great plan because it's so detailed and he's done such a great job so far. And with the 14-year wait, you kind of realize, like, I guess he didn't have it all figured out. Like, he was kind of writing it as he went along. And now that, like, I've read the series a lot more, and I kind of, you kind of realize, like, little things like, oh, words are wind. Like, he came up with that at this time, and that's why it's, it appears at this point in the story and doesn't appear before. Bloodraven is coming up at this point in the story, and you start seeing the retcons and stuff like that. And so I think my theories based on stuff that appears in earlier books, stuff that's about, a Game of Thrones, a Clash of Kings, I have much less confidence in than theories that are related to A Dance with Dragons and A Feast for Crows. I think George was not as detailed when writing those books, and I think he was writing fast, and a lot of times he was just writing stuff and not thinking about it. And a lot of ideas weren't there. Like, like, I don't have very much confidence in, say, Riverlands of the Dragon, which is something, a thing I did, about the Brotherhood Without Banners, like, being Aegon supporters. Like, I don't have, it's true that when Aegon landed, there's a whole bunch of parallels to the Brotherhood Without Banners with them. But do I have confidence that, like, George at the time was thinking about the Aegon cause and stuff like that? No, I don't. And then there's other stuff where I have more confidence. Like, I do really think that the Pink Letter is probably Mance. Like, I still think all this time that, yeah, that's probably the case. But my confidence levels of how well George had planned everything out has gone down every year. There's certain things where there's also certain things where you're like, I don't know, because I don't know if George ever decided. Like, George writes a lot of stuff ambiguously, leaves it open, and then, if he doesn't come back to it, like, what's the truth? So, like, I think it's rather clear that, for example, when he wrote The Purple Wedding, that he did want to create ambiguity on who the murderer was. And yes, he has this little finger reveal that it's Alina Tyrell, and the story doesn't really make sense. And I think that's all by design, so that if he wants, he can come back and change it. He's leaving it open. But if he never comes back to it, then I guess it's Alina Tyrell. You know, it's like Quentin being alive and dead at the same time. Like, he leaves it open. He leaves enough clues that Quentin could be alive, but we don't have another book. So where, Schrodinger's Quentin. So he does, I kind of have accepted over time that he's much more of a gardener than a pre-planner, that he writes a lot of possibilities, and I think he thinks about a lot of these possibilities, and a lot of these theories may have been something that crossed his mind, but I don't think he's committed to these things. Is I think the change. I think that he left everything open, which is probably the problem. Yeah, exactly. George himself says he doesn't know what's going to happen, let alone anyone else. And so I do think that, like, George, I think Ice and Fire is great for theory crafting because George has, like, left open all these different possibilities. But who leads the others during the long night? Night King was after. Will Winds and Dream have a Night King like the show? I don't think so. I don't think there's any opportunity to introduce him as a character. When are you going to get these close-ups? Like, are you going to, like, talk to the guy? Like, keep in mind, you remember the show, like, the show had, like, specific scenes that involved just the Night King, like going and doing things and having close-up of his face. And so you could have, like, characterization done, like, through silence. But is that really possible in a point of view written book? Like, think about that. Like, how are you supposed to have a Night King who doesn't talk, who like, and who can only be observed through other people's point of view, and kind of do the same thing? Like, you get like that hard home scene that might be possible, but you couldn't do, like, the scene where the Night King walks in and picks up a baby and, like, touches its face and it becomes another. Like, you couldn't do that. There's a lot of stuff like that it just wouldn't be possible. So I don't think there's going to be a night. I don't think George has any plan for a Night King or anything like that. I think he was thinking about the others being more hive-minded, which is how the Whites seem to act at the Fist of the First Men and things like that. So. Mm-hmm. It is true. Like, if we could do artwork of like Quentin in a box, like he's, like, burned and he's alive at the same time. Hey, how's it going?
About the dead Reed theory?
The dead Reek theory?
The dead Reed theory. The dead Howland Reed theory?
Oh, that Howland Reed is dead?
Yeah, the entire time he's been dead the entire time, and he was actually technically he's dead but not dead. He was able to warg into Jojen, and he's actually Jojen.
Oh yeah, I've heard that.
No, you
Yeah.
first off, no the fuck you didn't. I just made that up. How the fuck did you
No,
hear
no,
about
no,
that?
no, no.
What?
I've heard heard the theory that Jojen is actually Howland Reed. I've heard the
Oh,
theory. I've heard that before.
bro, I just made that up. Are you
I know,
serious?
I
God,
know.
Jesus.
I don't know. I didn't hear, like, that he was, or at least he was being warged by him or something. I mean, it's true that, like Jojen has all of this wisdom and confidence, and then he crosses the wall and he's a little boy all of a sudden, and there's weirdness, um, but yeah.
How I can't believe whatever.
Anyway, how you doing? I was gonna head to home. I was gonna head to bed soon. Anything you want to discuss before wanted to talk about. Carmen and I and Trey did a Berserk with the Boys. So Berserk with the Boys coming this week.
I was about to ask. By the way, but so I, I just I'm surprised how time flies. So I'll say this to the audience. As Preston and I were on call, like trying to figure out when to record Berserk at the Boys, I hear your kid in the background, and
Yeah,
your kid is forming like full coherent sentences now. It's not like
yeah,
random like dad, dad, dad. It's not that anymore. Like it was like eons
yeah,
ago.
yeah. I
Your
mean,
dad,
my
like
kid's like 5.5. Like, yeah, my
holy
older one is
shit,
like
where does the
five and a
time
half years old.
where does the time fly? And your kid is like, it took me back a little because we were like, all right, 9:30 we record, and your kid's like, what's happening at 9:30? Dad, what's happening at 9:30? And pretty soon, like full blown sentences like questioning you, like, Dad, come on, Quentin's alive? That's bullshit. Come on, what are you doing? Pretty soon you'll get
Oh, there's
sentences
all
like
of
that.
that. My boy is 5.5 going on 13. He is the most entitled, unhappy,
What?
whiny. Nah, he's also like the cutest, most wonderful kid in the world.
I'm so proud of you for not naming your kid after some fucking Ice and Fire character. Thank you
Oh
for doing
no,
that.
no, no,
Because
no,
I
no.
don't, did I ever tell you how the CEO of the company I'm technically aligned with named his daughter Daenerys?
Oh really?
Oh God, yeah, 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 yeah.
Well, there you
Mm.
go. There you go.
Uh,
Did I ever tell you the so there is a um PhD linguist. Her name is Marijuana Pepsi. Um,
I
that's her
think
name. Or
I
yeah,
think you might have mentioned her before in one of her academic
yeah.
papers. Yes.
Um, anyways, like she's done a lot of studies about like naming and like why people name kids the way they get named and whether it has any lasting effect on them and things like that. Um, it turns out there's nothing statistically significant that naming will have any effect on your kid. Like when it comes to like earning potential or anything like that, anything that's actually measurable. Obviously, in a subjective sense, names are very important, and she believes that because her fucking name was she was named fucking Marijuana Pepsi, and it fucking changed her life, right? So, but the interesting thing about names is with your social class, names they start out really unique at a lower social class. And then in the middle social class, the boring names come. And then they start becoming unique again when you get to the top. And so, and of course, because naming is done by parents. So it's more about what the parents are doing. So, like, say you name a kid Atticus, right? Like, you're cueing people about like who you are and like, oh well, I read literature, you have to know who Atticus is and things like that. And that's the message you're signaling when you name a kid, say Atticus, versus you name a kid named John. Now what's interesting is that the unique names on the lower end are unique in a completely different fashion as upper class unique naming. And lower class unique naming is actually they'll come up with new names. They'll put together random sounds or combine sounds to create names. So they'll might just name somebody like Kafofo, and that'll be like a name, you know. So it's kind of interesting thing, but I don't know where like Daenerys would fall. Like it's clearly you're signaling, but it's like I don't know if it's in the same realm as like naming your kid Atticus.
I'm in a meeting with him, other YouTubers, and his daughter jumps in. She just runs in like your kid does, and he goes, "Daenerys, I'm busy right now.
Oh, he
You have
called
to
her
give me
fully.
a
Didn't
mo."
even call her Danny.
No, Daenerys. I was like, "Oh shit."
Oh, there's a football player named Smoke Monday. Yeah, it's yeah. Yeah. So, but it's really, yeah, it's interesting socioeconomic thing. But yeah, I mean, it's complete. My son's name is Skylar, and like, it's, like that kind of thing. Yeah, I'm a elitist kind of like kind of guy. He's gonna have this unique name. He's gonna be Skylar. Um, he's not gonna be Matt. Um, anyway, this is the last question, and then I'm heading to bed, guys. Um, will Arya reunite with Nymeria? I think it was certainly George's intention to have Arya and Nymeria reunite, and he said to fans that he had a plan for Arya to reunite with Gendry and things like that. Certainly in the show they had them reunite. I think that's already, but at the same time, like, will that happen to the fanfic? I don't know. I've got, it might be better. There might be a better story if Numeria is killed. It all kind of depends. But I think that I think that's uh, I think it was probably George's intention. Looking at the evidence of them reuniting in the show and him saying that she's going to reunite with other people in the Riverlands, I think it was probably George's intention that they were going to reunite. But it would be funny if Nymeria didn't recognize her and killed her. I mean, they would still have their telepathic connection, right? Yeah. So,
I don't know if
Skylar,
you.
Shelly's boyfriend and South Park guitar player. No, the thing is Skylar spelled Schuyler. That's how my son's name is spelled, Skylar. Um,
I don't
yeah.
think you answered the question of who's going to lead the others in the fanfic.
Oh, who's going to lead the others in the fanfic? I think they're going to be hive-minded.
Okay.
Yeah, I think they're going to be hive-minded. Um, yeah, I don't think there's going to be any Knights King in that. I'm trying not to. I'm trying not to introduce characters, man. I'm trying to introduce as few characters as possible. Don't read this thing.
I still
Thank
strongly
you,
disagree
Selko.
with you about killing off that one character. I'm not going to spoil it for the audience. I still
So
strongly
I've told
disagree with you.
Carmine about different characters I plan on killing off, and he's like, "Oh man, but you need that character in your back pocket." Oh man, I'm like, dude, you gotta, you gotta trim it down. You gotta trim it down.
At least don't do like a point of view chapter for that person. Just like have them kind of there. Like do what the show did. They go away for a bit and they come back for like they go away for a season. They come back.
Yeah, the Gendry a bit.
Mm-hmm. Rowing the boat for like 3 seasons. Yeah, why not?
Yeah, good times, good times. I mean, I guess he put Theon in a locker for for a book. Yeah, no, I mean that's true. The story's supposed to get dark. You got to start killing people, and you got to start like just blindsiding people. Like what? Fuck. So yeah, gotta kill some. Gotta kill some people. Gotta kill some people. See how it goes. I'm still figuring out how to kill Stannis. How do you do that one without
You don't.
people fucking getting so angry?
Just sit him on the Iron Throne. Come on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. All right, Carmine, thank you for joining me. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. And I'll see you guys later on. Okay, bye bye.